Obviously, Ryan just named Will starter. What have you seen from Will over these last couple of weeks, and what is your reaction to him being started?
Yeah, I think Will's earned it, and we grade everything. Obviously he graded out the highest at the position. There's a lot of data-driven information with that in terms of decisions that he makes on the field. Running offense, and it's just as critical to be that guy in the run game as it is in the pass game in terms of what we ask the quarterback to do here. So I think he's really worked extremely hard in the offseason. From the end of spring ball on April 13th to now, he's made great strides. But, we gave him a plan over the summer to work on, and he took it and ran with it. So, where he is now is pretty impressive. And the one thing that he has is he has experience. He's been in a huddle. He's been in a huddle in a lot of games. He's been in a huddle in big games. So, this isn't new to him. Columbus is new to him, but playing college football isn't new to him. So I think that experience, really started to shine through here during camp, and, excited to see where he goes with this.
Deep left field wall, Brendan Gulick, Buckeyes Now on Sports Illustrated.
Coach, I certainly don't want to put words in Ryan Day's mouth, but it seems like the last few times he's kind of gone through this exercise of naming the starting quarterback, that being able to trust that quarterback to make good decisions has been pretty high on his pecking order. What is most important to you when you're looking at a quarterback in terms of evaluating the skill sets, decision making, all of that?
Yeah, I think decision making is at the top of the list for all quarterbacks, just because that's what the game is. It's are you putting us in the right play? Are you getting us out of a bad play? Are you making the decisions to throw the check down and try to, instead of forcing it into coverage? It's not just who has the strongest arm, but the decision making process has always been at the top of the list. And then after that, it would be repetitive accuracy and then athleticism. And I think Will has all three of those. His ability to help us in the run game is going to be a really big plus for us this year. Because he's not just a guy that's going to hand it off back there. I think people are going to have to respect him with the ability to run. Again, part of his work ethic in the offseason, I mentioned it the other day, he ran 22 miles an hour this summer at 236 pounds. So, there is a threat of a run from that position. So you're going to have to defend 11. Some teams when you play against them, you have to defend 10 because the quarterback's not going to hurt you in the run game. But Will can if you do. Now, there's not going to be a ton of quarterback-driven run where we're just snapping the ball to him like he's Tim Tebow and just ramming him up in there. But there are certain packages that we have for our quarterbacks to make sure that we're keeping defenses honest. And I think, as you said, decision-making, repetitive accuracy, and that athleticism, I think Will has all three of those.
So following up on that, how would you evaluate Devin and Julian in particular and their decision-making from what you've seen from them?
They're both do a really good job. I think that's the one thing about it. This was not one guy's here and the rest of them just didn't show up. They all competed every day, and I think the room is really it's a great room to be in. They all are really truly care about each other. They enjoy each other's success. We talk about the word mudita, which means I vicariously derive joy from other people's success, and they're like that. When another quarterback makes a play, those guys are fired up. It's a really close-knit group. I know every one of them wants to be the starting quarterback, but I know they're not disappointed that it's Will because they really care about him. So all of those guys did a really, really nice job. They do a good job in decision-making. They do a good job in repetitive accuracy. Right now, Will's just above those guys.
Third row right, Dylan Davis, Delaware Gazette.
Ryan said that Julian Sands most certainly in that competition to be the backup quarterback. I guess just how close is he to Devin right now? Where does maybe Devin have a step on him, and how can he close that gap with the time you have left?
Yeah, I'm not a predictor of anything. So, it's always about what was done. We evaluate it, and then we work off of that. So I'm not going to make any predictions on how it goes forward. But I thought Devin had a really good camp. This was a really close competition. And I think all three of those guys, and Lincoln too, were really in the mix at that spot. And then we'll continue to go. And the one thing we talked about that I think everybody here knows, even better than I do, is that you just mentioned the name Cardale Jones. They won a national championship. He started the season off at 3. And there's a million stories about that, and I think our players are really conscious about that.
To that point, whoever does win that backup job ultimately, do you feel like maybe more pressed to get those guys into meaningful snaps during games than maybe you would in other years where, because those guys don't have that experience to lean on?
Ideally, but you don't have control of that. It'd be great if we can get these guys valuable reps in these games, but if it's a slugfest, and it's a 28-27 ball game, in the back of your mind, you're not thinking about, hey, I got to get my second guy some reps now. We don't win this game, So I think how the game dictate themselves, then you'll have a plan. But most of the time when you have a plan, it doesn't go the way you think it's going to go. So just ask all those bettors out there that lose a lot of money every weekend, right? It doesn't go exactly how you think it's going to go. So you've obviously loved to get everybody reps, but you'll take it as the games come.
Far right, Kellyanne Stitz, WSYX.
Coach Kelly, you mentioned that there was a progression with Will through the spring to now of him taking steps. But was there a specific moment that you guys saw in practice when the scrimmage that solidified his job?
I wish there was. And most of the time there isn't, and it's you talk about that with people's Heisman campaigns and like what won them the Heisman, was it this specific play? But it's the process of what they did over the course of the time. And I think with Will, it's over the course of time what he did, and again, he was probably a little behind when he got here because he got here. Devin and Lincoln had been here. They'd been in this offense. They had reps, seasoned reps in this offense, and Will and Julian and Eric had just gotten here. So they were just trying to catching up during the spring. We talk a lot, like Ryan talked about, are you remembering, are you learning? Most of the spring, every single day for Will, Aaron, and Jules was learning every day because there was a new install every day, and they kind of just figured this out. Now we're putting more stuff in, where Dev and Lincoln had been through that before. So I think when the things settled down and he could go through all the spring cut-ups, watch film on his own, kind of study on his own, you started to see him. So when we started to meet again, when we got back here in August, you could see that he had a really good command of it because of the time that he put in between April 13th and then we started back up on the 31st.
Fifth row right, Cameron Teague Robinson, The Athletic.
Chip, when Ryan talked a lot, and you talked a lot about Will's consistency, kind of his growth in the offense, but how important is, say, a scrimmage when you have a quarterback battle? How important is seeing him in that time, and how did he stand out Saturday?
Yeah, well, offensively, we honestly in the first day practice got our tails kicked. That is a pretty good defense. But last Saturday, I think they really showed up, and they really when the lights were on and we had a scrimmage situation, they all made really good plays. No one turned the ball over that day. We were really consistency. I think we completed at over 70%. They were efficient with the football, and we were really good mix of run and pass. So, in that one scrimmage that we had last Saturday, you could see them, but they all played well. And that was a day that I think all of them kind of stepped up last Saturday. So, we're hopeful that we can do the same exact thing this Saturday and then continue to build upon it. So,
Deep middle, Jeremy Birmingham, The Podcast.
Chip, I don't know if it was last week or the week before, you mentioned that you thought there were three NFL caliber offensive linemen starting on this team. As you've gotten to experience the depth a little bit more, do you have anybody that you're kind of renowned as like a run guru guy? So I'm curious, where do you see the next wave of offensive linemen in this program, and who's catching your eye of the guys that are not in the starting lineup?
Good question. 'Cause I think we've been forced because of the illness that's gone through. Jimmy spent some time out. Donnie spent some time out. Fitz has spent some time out. Carson's been out for a little bit. Luke's been out for a little bit. So I think Zen and Austin are two guys that have really stepped up and kind of caught your eye that, maybe not as much as it was in the spring, but they're taking advantage of their reps. And I think, one of the things you always preach as a coach, and sometimes it's coach speak, don't count your reps, make your reps count. But those two guys are two guys that have really made their reps count. I think Tegra, because Tegra's taken every snap since, hasn't missed a day. He's made his reps count. Seth has made his reps count. So, those four guys have probably been the most consistent just because the other guys have been out, so it's been in and out, in and out, in and out. So, but those four guys have kind of stood out for us.
Have you noticed with Ian Moore, he's a guy that was recruited, but we haven't really talked much about freshman offensive linemen because there's just no real reason to generally, but.
Well, unless you're his parents.
I'm sure his parents.
Let's just make sure there's never no reason to talk about it.
For our purposes.
Yes.
What have you seen out of Ian and
Ian got his black stripe removed today, which was really cool. So I think really great timing by you. Great question. And I know you have, I know you know a lot about this place. But he did actually have his black stripe removed today. So he's come along too, but he's another guy that's benefited, from those extra reps that sometimes they don't normally get. Hi, Jelani. It's my guy.
Third row left, Andy Anders, 11 Warriors.
Yeah, continuing with the offensive line, you talked about the quarterbacks a little bit in the scrimmage. How have you seen them, as some of this illness has started to, I guess, relieve? How have you seen them respond to the challenge that this defensive line presents in practice?
Iron sharpens iron, when you got to go against Jack and JT and Talik and Kenyatta in that group every day, you can't help but get better. And I think those guys have taken advantage of those opportunities that they've gotten, and you can see growth, from the spring until now. So, I think the one thing that we know is it's going to be a long season. So you got to develop those guys. You're not going into the season with 5 linemen. It's just not going to happen when you're playing a 16-game season. So when you're going to play that many games, you got to have as much depth as you can. And I think because those guys, you never wish an illness or a person to miss practice on anybody, but there are sometimes some benefits of it. And the benefits of it is those guys that gotten the extra reps in these last week or so have really benefited from it.
Second row middle, Stephen Means, Cleveland.com.
With Austin, I think we were out there earlier in practice, obviously, so a lot's changed since then, but he was working a lot at left guard. And Ryan just mentioned the fact that he's been moving a tackle a little bit. What about his skill set do you think works at tackle?
He's done both, and I think the one thing, he's over 6'5", he's long, so he's got the size to play tackle, but he's put together. He kind of looks like a guard, but until you pull up on him and go, wow, I didn't know he was actually that tall. We had that conversation the other day, like, what is he? He's 6'5", He's got the requisite arm length to play tackle. And to have guys that are position versatile, that aren't your starters, that can be guard tackles or center guards, is critical in terms of being able to do that. So you're always trying to find really your top 8. Who's your backup center, who's the backup guard, who's the backup tackle. If there's someone that can be a guard tackle, then that's obviously beneficial.
What have you guys liked about Luke at center so far?
Same thing, just developing depth, and I think the more versatile you can make yourself, the more opportunities you're going to get to go on the field, because you don't know who's going to go down, so you don't want to be caught. That's the one position, because it's critical in terms of decision making. They usually are in charge of the blocking scheme in terms of where we're going and calling the directions out and all those other things, but you also have to be consistent with the snap. So the fact that we can get valuable reps with him and Padilla and Seth and those guys in there and Carson has been beneficial, because you can never have too many centers.
Fourth row right, Andy Backstrom, Letterman Row.
Chip, for the scrimmage on Saturday, was it pretty vanilla, or were you able to kind of let it rip with scheme and what you've been trying to install?
Yeah, I mean, they are not vanilla. So I think we whatever we had installed and they had installed, we did. There wasn't any game planning that went on, but it was, really just, I think that going back to it is our quarterbacks had an opportunity to be successful, because they were really sharp in terms of, we want to get completions, understanding the game of football. I thought they played situational football really well. What are we trying to do on first down? We're in backed up territory trying to get 2 first downs. Are we taking shots down the field in this situation? No, we're not. We're trying to get 2 first downs and get it moving. Now that we've gotten a couple first downs, now we can start to take some shots, but to watch them play the game within a game, because in the other practice periods, a lot of those times they're scripted, so the play is called. And then sometimes it's like, well, what are we going to do here? And I was like, I would never call that play against that defense. I didn't know they were going to be in that defense. But when you get into the feel of the game and the flow of the game and how they're calling it, then you can kind of adjust and put your players in situations to make plays.
Bill Rabinowitz, Columbus Dispatch.
Hey, Chip, I'd like to get a sense of kind of the message that you had for Will at the end of spring practice, which was up and down for him, understandably. Was it a thick notebook of stuff? Was it a long speech? What you can be with them and talk to them in the summer more than you used to be, obviously, but what was kind of the message to him? What did you want to see him work on and improve?
Yeah, just the specifics of the position, so really footwork at the quarterback spot when you're throwing the ball, your ability to set up, your ability to have a base, your ability to drive the football really starts from your feet up. And I think he worked extremely hard from that standpoint in terms of throwing the ball. I know Ryan had mentioned earlier in the season he felt like there was more zip this camp than we were during the springtime, and then really the grasp of the offense. Because I also think you can put zip on the football when you know where it's supposed to go. When you go back there and you're somewhat tentative with it, if they're not coming out of your hand as quick because your decision-making process isn't that. So really watching film, and Will's a huge film junkie. He's always in the quarterback room watching something, trying to study it, going through it, calling plays out, working on calling a play out of a huddle. How do I, because sometimes he can get really wordy, to practice all of those things, understanding that aspect of the game. But I think from a physical standpoint, really getting his feet going in the pocket, being able to put a little bit more zip on the ball, mechanically making sure that kinesthetic chain is all working in one motion at the same time. And then just the grasp total of the offense of what we're doing and getting a really good feel of it, that I feel really good about this. And then being able to communicate, this package is, I'm still a little, all right, then let's grind on this one a little bit. How do you feel about quick game? I feel really good about that. All right, then let's move and find out what because we're teachers, and teachers is just really, education is the transportation of knowledge, but you can't transport that knowledge to an individual if you don't know what he knows. So he was really open with his feedback of, I feel really good about this. I think I need to work on this. So spending time with him and just getting a chance to visit with him on those things has, I think, really shown up for him this camp.
Last question, Austin Horton podcast.
Chip, sounds like Emeka had another pretty good scrimmage on Saturday. With the variety of ways you might be able to use him, does he remind you of someone you've had previously, or is he in a box on his own?
I think he's in a box on his own. A lot of the slot receivers that I've had in the past have been smaller, and been somewhat mismatches from that standpoint. But Mech's ability to go in and dig out linebackers, Mech's ability to carry the football, and then Mech's ability to get open and make really tough contested catches, I think is really what kind of sets him apart, because he can do everything in there. I think sometimes the prototypical slot receiver is that small, quick, get in and out of things, but it really affects you in the run game, because you're trying to run the ball and he's an inside guy, and now all of a sudden he's at the point of attack, and all of a sudden he's kind of looking over his shoulder, hoping they don't run him over, where Mech isn't like that. Mech really can do a lot of things, and to have that versatility, I think, is something that hopefully we're going to have a lot of fun with this fall, trying to put him around and put him in different positions and allow him to make plays, because he really is a playmaker.
You haven't got a lead in that group, though. Like
He didn't ask you. He didn't. I'm learning. Yes.
Yeah, having a guy like that leading that group, though, how huge is that? I guess, from a.
It's great, and I think you can talk to the receivers, but I think the tone that he set with that group, and it really is a special group. That whole group of guys is a special group, and for him to be the leader from the front, because he leads by example, but he also is a really good vocal leader. Like he holds those guys accountable, holds the whole group accountable, and most importantly, holds himself accountable. So.
Joey Coffin, dispatch, would you like to interrupt there too?
Thank you, Jerry. Just wanted to ask, do you guys gain any advantage or by having clarity at quarterback announced 16 days before an opener, 2 weeks? Does it help you at all?
I think it does. I think you know who's going out there with the ones, and I think it also for the offense, you're starting to get into gel, and every time I've been in quarterback competitions, it expresses itself and it's authentic when it happens. Sometimes it doesn't happen until the week of the first game. Sometimes you go into the first game, you still haven't made it, so you're going to play two quarterbacks in that. But I think from now until, it's 2 weeks from this Saturday that we're playing a football game, is that we're getting that offensive line back together. That one unit is starting to get together. Who are those guys? Who's the tight end? You got Trayvon, you got Q. You're pretty solid in terms of where you are at wide receiver. Now those guys got to get reps together. So not that you just name those guys, but how does that 11 mesh together as a group, and how do they do it? And them learning Will and Will learning them. Just little things. It's the game is always one in the details. And I think the longer the same group of guys is together, the better you're going to be with the details part of it. So I think getting him in there early is beneficial from that standpoint, just because it's more time on task with one unit.
Coach, we got one more question. Bill Landis, Kings of the North.
Chip, you mentioned that Tegra has played, or hasn't missed a rep, I guess. What stands out about him as you watch him, and as a guy who's, I think he's like 6'6", 330, playing guard?
That's what stands out about him.
Well, I'm sure it does, but does he, I just heard sometimes people describe sort of your desire for offensive linemen to be maybe like a little more athletic and movement oriented.
Yeah, I think Tegra's really athletic and can really sink his hips, and he's long. He's really long, and when you can play long on the offensive line and keep defensive linemen away from people because of your length, that's a really big deal for us. So we like offensive linemen that are big, because big people beat up little people. So we like Tegra a lot.
Coach, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.